Finally, a new Random Researchers episode. And one that has been in development hell for a very long time. It's finally here. Welcome to Random Researchers. I'm doing Chris Views, Martinings and General Ramblings. And this is a worst to best list of Coldplay, worst to best. In this video I'm going to be going over the studio albums of Coldplay, just the studio albums, and ranking them from what I feel is the worst to the very best. Without further ado, let's go. Yes, in my opinion, Milo Zoloto is the worst Coldplay album for a few different reasons. One, knowing that it is a concept album, I really don't understand how the non-specific lyrics connect with the so-called love story that is portrayed on the album. And two, this album just goes on and on and on, and the further I get through it, it seems to deliver less and less and less. The further we get through to the latter half of their discography, the more boring they seem to get. I do like a good few cuts of the album though. Paradise, Charlie Brown, Every Teardrop is a Waterfall are fine pop rock hits, but in the grander scheme of things, this seems to be a bit of a non-specific record for me. Music of the Spheres. It is consistently ranked as Coldplay's worst album in history, and it's not hard to see why. Especially from an outsider's perspective, it's hard to imagine Coldplay being the best band in the world. This album's biggest sin is being so hyped up with this big space fantasy with different planets, like the previous album being so conceptual. The more I listen to this album, the more I think Coldplay has become such a disingenuous corporate image of their former selves. Especially with the lyrics on the song Coloratura being so patronising, because it borrows all of these classical arrangements and prog rockisms to talk about this crazy world that we live in, and then using emojis as song titles. It's like such a desperate attempt to be so hip and cool, but it's mainly just attention seeking to me. Such an overrated album. Don't get me wrong, there are some good cuts on this album here. The Magic, which is being one of Chris Martin's best vocal performances period, the pulsating synths of Midnight, and even the closer O being quite gloomy songs. They're perfectly fine for this otherwise low-key album. The sole reason why I'm calling this album so overrated is because of a certain single. This single right here should not have been on this album at all. It is basically Avicii making a dance beat and then Chris Martin singing on top of it. It should be Avicii featuring Chris Martin. And if it's not clear why I think this album just overpowers the sales of this album, just look at this. Yeah, that. The single is just overpowering the sales of this album when it should have been a low-key release. And that is why I think it is just so overrated. A Head Full of Dreams. I have a bit of a love-hate relationship with this album. I respect it for being such a turning point, if there was any in this stage of their career. I mean, the groovy riffs of Adventure of a Lifetime remains one of my favourite Coldplay songs, period. The percussion heavy and relatability of Hymn for the Weekend and Fun and Amazing Day and Everglow being ballads of togetherness and positivity makes me wonder, are Coldplay being forced to bring this positive image to the corporates? I do like the closer on this album, Up and Up. Although it's a solid closer with varying guitar passages at the end, it's a solid closer for an otherwise fairly decent album. Everyday Life is another one of those albums that I feel is so overrated and then just fell off the bandwagon quite quickly. It's another one of those albums where I feel corporates are pushing Coldplay's disingenuous image to the limelight. Although fans like to portray this album as the best since Viva La Vida, let me ask you this. If this was a regular release where a double album with very few good moments and is just rife with filler content with non-specific lyrics about how serious the world is nowadays, would it be good?
No.
Yeah, I thought so. Just like I discussed on the closer of Music of the Spheres, Coloratura, especially on orphans. I mean, why would you want to portray people like refugees or the poor in Africa or racism, people struggling to get even the slightest bits of essentials under this chorus of
I wanna know when I can drink with my friends.
That really does not appeal to any of these individuals. It's non-specific and just trying to fit in to the pop rock ballad. I'd spout these words once again here. Disingenuous and patronising. I do have to praise a couple of the tracks here. The chilling, troubling town that builds up to this amazing crescendo at the end is one of my favourite Coldplay songs, period. Champion of the World, and even the slightly jazzy feel of Arabesque being such good written songs on this otherwise overbearing album that is rife with unnecessary filler content. Alright, we're on the top part of the list, and we're kicking it off with... yeah, Parachutes. It's the debut, but comparing this album to the grunge and the Britpop that was happening in the 90s, it's such a warm welcome, a softer approach that is just a warm welcome to the scene. Of course, they burst onto the scene with this huge single that could have been a one-hit wonder. It definitely doesn't remind me of a specific colour. The album rocketed to success with great songs such as the piano-led ballad Trouble and the slight Elton John inspired Everything's Not Lost, and even the unjustly underrated Shiver and Spies, to name a few. The thing that hurts this album quite a bit are tracks 7, 8 and 9. They stick with the formula nonetheless, but I don't think they really have the best flow from track to track. It is of course a band still figuring out their sound, but I'd rather just skip over those tracks to the closer. Overall, a fantastic debut for Coldplay, and it would eventually bring them to a rush of blood to the head. X and Y, the big arena rock album that follows up A Rush of Blood, the transition from making post-Britpop to making more poppy rock anthems and beginning to incorporate the hookier song structures that would remain with them for their entire career. It is of course quite a controversial album in comparison to their previous two albums, a low-key album in the eyes of Coldplay, given that the frontman Chris Martin shows a distaste for this album, except for one, but it's not overpowering like A Sky Full of Stars. It is arguably the best ever performance and most relatable song of Coldplay, period. It's Fix You, especially when they perform it live. I do have to shout out the deeper cuts of this album, the Kraftwerk-inspired Talk, having lyrics about someone who is apprehensive about the future and wanted to talk to someone. It is relatable to the 10th degree, and if you think the melody sounds a lot like... you'd be right. That was the idea. The amazing crescendos of the opener Square One, Low and White Shadows continue to be firm favourites of mine. God, I love this album. If you haven't checked it out already, I highly recommend that you do. I would also, before I move on to the next one, I have to shout out these live performances. Fix You live at Buenos Aires and Low live at Glastonbury. Arguably one of the best live albums. It's not really a live album, but it's arena rock. We're here. The sophomore album. The most important album, arguably, in Coldplay's discography. The opener, Politic, is of course explosive in comparison to the soft-spoken Parachutes. The guitar-led In My Place is so amazing. Side note, if you ever come across a comment saying stuff like, if you feel useless, remember Coldplay have guitarists. Show them this video. The two icons of the tracklist, Clocks, was originally going to be saved for X and Y, was ultimately saved for this album. The arpeggiated pianos is so simplistically good. It's simple yet brilliant. And that is it is simple yet brilliant. That's just amazing. And The Scientist, the video for this song is just genius, and of course goes well with the lyrics of regret after a mistake and wishing that you could go back to the start. The closer, Amsterdam, while not being about said city, has a bit of a post-rock flavour, and it's having a constant build and then into a crescendo that instantly hooks me. It is an amazing closer. The title track is one that I always imagine having a music video of someone sitting in their house while it burns down. This is fine. Before I move on though, I must shout out the live performance of God Put a Smile on Your Face during the Milo Zoloto tour. Seeing Coldplay go wild on the stage is such an amazing sight to behold. Here we are, the top of the list. Woo! Yeah, sure, this may be a popular top pick among Coldplay fans, but I do feel that, speaking from the experience of an album, Viva La Vida is the closest that Coldplay has come to perfection. There is a lot of recency bias, I must say, in relation to the hate that Coldplay has got. Just overpowers the fact that they made fantastic albums over the 2000s. Case in point, this album, and everyone that precedes it. In my views, it's such an interesting sound for rock music at the time, but the deep cuts of this album are not for the impatient. The big title track, the big string-heavy title track, may be overplayed, but don't go thinking because it's overplayed, it's bad, because it isn't. The feeling of love, the lust for power, and the loss are themes of this album that are just some of the best conceptual stories that are conveyed in the lyrics. It's one of the best lyrical albums that I have listened to thus far. Just because I'm losing doesn't mean I'm lost. My god, it's just... There we go, my list is complete, and I hope you saw my views a little bit clearer. And if you despise everything that I said, feel free to absolutely decimate me in the comments below. Endscreen.